Right, so I guess I will start with introducing myself as Aaron Armstrong. It's my father, legendary pickup maker Kent Armstrong. And behind him we have some of my grandfather's old gear, also renowned in the music industry, Dan Armstrong. That's one of his Dan Armstrong London guitars, one of his amps, and you can even see the pickup cover and sliding pickup brace that's behind my father, which you might not be able to see because you're in the way. So we're going to basically do kind of an interview setup. I'm going to speak with my dad. We're going to break it down into a few different sections, probably edit it quite a lot as well, but it's going to essentially be based around our family history in the music industry. And then we will do a section that has to do with the way that the company is structured and, you know, how different branches of the company do different things. And then we'll get on to other aspects like the technical talk about pickups and what my father knows, what I know, and what I don't know, and what my father still teaches me. So yeah, we're just going to basically have a nice chilled out chat for a little bit and see what we can come up with. Okay.
How do you want to start?
Well, I guess we should start at the beginning with Dan Armstrong and the fact that, you know, he did kind of kick off the whole thing. He was born in, what year was he born in?
33.
33, and where was he born?
1933. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA.
Pennsylvania, okay.
He first started out playing an upright double bass that his mother had bought for him, and had painted it pink.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a pink. So he was a very much a musical savant. Once he was actually bet in a bar that he couldn't play the trumpet. They gave him a trumpet. The bet was for $5. Now back in the 50s, that was a lot of money. He came back after a couple of hours and you thought he was Al Hurt. He was playing at that, and he won the $5 because. But I've seen him sit down at his mother's electric organ, and within a couple of hours you thought he was George Wright. And, you know, the guy was just musical. And of course he moved to New York and became one of the top session men in New York City. And he was almost like the wrecking crew of the Eastern. If anybody knows who the wrecking crew was, they were the Western wrecking crew. People like Glenn Campbell and a lot of session men who.
You say about him being a savant, there's that baby book there, and I'm pretty sure it says in that baby book his first word was literally guitar or something like that.
It probably was.
So yeah,
it probably was. He
was well into that.
He was very good at music. Phenomenally good, and he recorded with a lot of people. It's just the list is just humongous because anytime they needed a session man in, he would come. And
so when did he move to New York then?
This was the early 60s. He set up a music shop when 48th Street was still where Rockefeller Plaza is now. He had a second floor room across from Manny's, and he did guitar repairs. So in between his session gigging and getting himself set up as a session man, he was doing all kinds of guitar repairs. And I was living in Florida with the rest of my family and my mother. They were long divorced. And my next oldest brother, Eric, and I moved up with Dad. And I would go into the shop a lot on 48th Street. Learned a lot. We had Jeff Skunk Baxter worked on the Dad's repair bench, along with Eddie Deal and a few others. And eventually Rockefeller Center was going to be built, so the Rockefeller Foundation bought out a lot of 48th Street. So some shops moved further down 48th Street, and Dad went and opened up a music shop down in Greenwich Village, a retail and repair shop, down at 500 LaGuardia Place, right across from Grand Union. Back then it was a grocery store, just around the corner from the Bitter End, the famous club. So he was down there. I was living with my brother. We were living up in Riverdale, New York, going to high school at DeWitt Clinton. And I used to go down to the shop all the time and watch things going on. And at that time, Eddie Deal and Carl Thompson were running the repair shop in the basement of 500 LaGuardia Place. Dad had moved to the first floor upstairs apartment, and he was refurbishing the next apartment up. Dad had took a lease up on the whole building. And Eric and I eventually moved down to Greenwich Village. And in my, I had just finished 11th grade. I was just 17, 1970. Carl and Eddie decided they want to go off and open up their own shop because they didn't want to be working in a basement. So I asked Dad, well, can I take over the repair shop down in the basement? Because I'd been watching everybody work for all these years. And I took over the repair shop. Yeah, it was like June of 1970 I took it over. So in fact, this June will make 52 years I've been in the business. So it's time for me to retire.
And obviously, it being Greenwich Village around that time, there were lots of people coming in and out of the shop who at the time you might not have thought were going to be as famous as they are. But
Oh, we had quite a few famous ones. The Beatles would come in and out. And Dad had a little recording, not recording, what would you call it, a jamming room in the back, which was all super soundproofed. But we used to get Cream coming in all the time. They'd go back there and jam for hours. Jimi Hendrix would come in all the time. We had a lot of famous. And to me, I really wasn't into the fame thing of these famous people. I mean, if somebody like Chuck Yeager had walked in, I'd have been really impressed. But yeah, we had a lot of people. And of course, Dad had a lot of good friends like Neil Diamond. Just a lot of the famous people would come into the shop.
I've heard you regale a story about Jimmy Page asking you to go on tour. No, who was it?
Oh no, that wasn't till later. That's later into my English story when we get into the English time. That's coming up.
Okay, so what year did you come over to England? Then
well, first of all, let me continue the story of the shop. After a few months of Dad was now living out and working with Neil Diamond out in California, and Dad calls me up one day and says, you have a new business partner in your repair shop. I said, really? Who? Bill Lawrence. So I said, oh, really? And of course I knew Bill. Bill had designed all the pickups on the Plexiglass guitars. And Bill was quite a pickup designer and maker from Germany. So Bill and I worked together for 10 months. And we did a lot of, we worked on Lucille, B.B. King's guitar. And the first pickup I ever made was in New York City. And I made 2 that day. And it was for Robbie Robertson of the band, the night they drove Old Dixie down and so forth. He'd brought in his aqua blue Telecaster, and he wanted a humbucker put in the neck. Well, the problem was the old Gibson humbuckers had really long dog legs, and I think they still do today, of course. And if you have to route deep into a Telecaster, you're sort of weakening the neck joint. So he said, well, can you make it as shallow as possible? So I made him a fiber board base plate and wound 2 Gibson bobbins and put the cover on it, put it all together. But I had to route out the body slightly. And I was just using a drill press with a drill bit in it. And finished routing out the pot and lifted up the drill. And the whole chuck of the drill came out with the drill bit on it, the routing bit on it, and spun across the top of his guitar. And made
disastrous.
I'm thinking, oh Lord, I'm in trouble here. It's Robbie's guitar. So I took the pick guard, and it fit perfectly over the gouge, the big, right through the finish. So I put it all back together, and Robbie came in the next day, and I said, Robbie, I had a little accident with your telly. He goes, oh, what happened? I said, oh, I gouged it. So he picks up the guitar, and he's anxiously looking. Well, I can't see anything. I said, well, it's under the pick guard. He says, we're good to go.
That's all right. You came clean.
Yeah, I came clean. Yeah, I came clean. But that was my first ever made first pickup, and that was in late 1970. So, and of course, Bill Lawrence taught me all I knew, and it really helped me out to learn the rewinding business. And it was very crude and rudimentary at that time because there just was nobody doing kind of rewinds and rebuilds. It just plain didn't exist. Basically, if a pickup broke down, you had to go buy a new Gibson. And even then, the shop only had like a few pickups that you could. There just wasn't the aftermarket that there is today. There was no Seymour Duncans or Larry DiMarzio. So in August of '71, Dad was finished with Neil Diamond and had met Jacqueline Pierce, who was very famous English, well, say semi-famous. She was Servalan in Blake 7. an old
Before my time, but okay.
before your time, yes. Well, you can look up Jacqueline Pierce. So they moved over here, and Dad gave my brother and I a choice: stay and fend for yourselves in New York City, because he's closing up the music shop and giving up the lease on the building, or come to England and I'll put you through college. So we came to college. We came to college here in England. And that's how we got here in England, and I carried on doing rewinds and so forth. But then eventually, after a few months, we spent a winter in Edenbridge, and Dad went up to London, lived at the back of the Regent's Park apartments back there. I went to Reigate, and Eric went to Tunbridge Wells, my brother. So this was like the spring of '72. Dad calls up and says, do I have any pre-wound humbucker coils, because Jimmy Page's Les Paul has gone down. So I said, yeah. So on that Saturday, I took the train up and got the subway up to Regent's Park, and Jimmy and Dad were there, and I just quickly did the whole job right there. All I had to do was lift the pickup up, take the cover off, take it off, put all the new guts in, and I took out his 2 cream coils. I don't know whatever happened to those, but I've got them somewhere. And put it all back together.
They'll be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of money. But I took them out, put it all back together, and Jimmy was just blown away. He says, "You're good. You know what you're doing." I said, yeah, I'm pretty good. He says, "Well, would you come on tour with us?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, we're about to do a North American tour, and would you like to be our guitar tech?" And I said, "Ooh, that sounds like a great idea." Oh yeah. And of course, Dad pipes up and goes, "No, you're in college. I'm paying for you to go to college. You go to college. You're not going on tour with Led Zeppelin."
I would have thought, been like, yeah, that sounds cool.
Well, I think he wanted me to carry on and do something more important. So I carried on going to college and doing rewinds for Andy's Guitar Workshop, Roka's, basically the whole in the little music district of Denmark Street. I was doing, and of course, I finished college in '75. And I had been working at Dad's guitar company, the Dan Armstrong London, and they only made 333, and I stamped each one of them. They made long scale, short scale, and guitars. So the basses, the guitars, it's only 330. So they're going to be, one day they're going to be quite rare, because I know that Jack Bruce had one, and his got burnt up in his house fire. So there's now 332 that are officially out there, and so that all folded up in Christmas of '75, and I'd finished college, and I started up my motorcycle courier service while I was doing pickups. It wasn't making me enough money, so I started up a motorcycle courier service in St. Albans called Hand Delivery. So I was literally able to, and I was in and out of London so much that I could offer a 24-hour turnaround for all the shops in Denmark Street, and so I became quite popular for the fact that I could really do them, get them in and get them out pretty fast. I worked a lot of late evenings, but it was good fun. And then I could see the built-in obsolescence of a lot of pickups. And I had designed the floating pickup on the Dan Armstrong London, which was a low impedance pickup, hence very thin, because it was using very heavy gauge wire with an 11-to-1 transformer inside there. So I thought, well, how do I make a high impedance pickup? So I just expanded the coils, put a ceramic magnet up the middle, a taller magnet, and that was my first pickup, which Schecter named the Z Plus pickup.
Oh, right. Okay, so what did Schecter name it that?
Well, because I had made 2 semi-clear ones with my rainbow. At that time, they're called rainbow pickups. And I sent them, one to Jeff Baxter and one to my father, and they're both living out in California. And Dad decided that he thought it would be a good pickup to make with Schecter. So he went to Schecter and said, and he very carefully filed off my logo on it. And took it to Schecter, and Schecter said, "Oh yeah, this looks like it sounded really good." They wired it up and said, "Oh, that's a great sounding pickup." And Dad said, "Yeah, I know how to make this thing. Yeah, we'll make this thing." Well, after almost 2 years of them not being able to make them correctly, the whole project fell down for something like $250,000. And I called up Schecter and said, "Hey guys, I designed the Z. They had named it the Z Plus pickup. And I said, would you guys like to manufacture them correctly? And they said, well, yeah, we would. We were really deep in debt on this project. And I said, so they sent out their vice president. He looked me over in Brighton. At this time, you'd just been born. This is like late 1980. And they gave me like $300 and said, well, get yourself an airline ticket and get out to California. And within a couple of days of me getting out there, they were producing good pickups. It just didn't last long because the way you and I manufacture is phenomenally labor intensive. I mean, it really is.
So these were all being made in epoxy, were they?
Yes. Yeah. And the good thing about molding in epoxy was it's almost indestructible. Unless a tank rolls over it, you're not going to break them. I've had a few people actually take like a pipe soldering iron, like 300 watt. Oh, yeah, they melt them. I mean, that's just one of the problems. So, and eventually we moved from Brighton to Shaddixhurst, Hazeldean, Shaddixhurst, and I built an office there and carried on making my pickups and doing rewinding works. And by this time, this is like 1985.
By this time you started using child labour, because I remember unscrewing pickups at the age of 6. I remember taking screws out the Ken Smith bass pickups. And,
helping me out, And your sister Katie was actually assembling the Dan Armstrong effects units. She was actually.
I remember using that orange
flip thing for doing the bars. You guys did all. You guys did. Good old. I paid you guys pretty good.
You did pay us all right, but yes, you definitely used the child labour that was available to you.
Good thing there's no child labour laws here, but yeah. So, like I say, we moved there the first day of '85, and eventually built an office down there, and. We started designing. I just started designing all kinds of different types of pickups, and all in the epoxy system. And eventually went into guitar parts, because everybody was always asking me, "Well, do you have some pots? Do you have some capacitors? Do you have some wire? Do you have this?" And I hooked up with a company called WD Music Products, and at this time they were out in Long Island, New York. And said, "Would you let me be a distributor for your parts?" And again, we called everything Rainbow Products. And sure enough, I started selling guitar parts, and took on different people. And my current manager, Ben Green, is like, wow. I mean, he's kept the company really going all these years. And he came and did his, work experience. Yeah, he came and spent 2 weeks doing work experience. And it was kind of funny because you're not supposed to pay him or anything else. But even though he worked so hard, I still paid him. I'm not again child labor. I still even paid you guys. But yeah, I paid him something, and he's been in with me pretty much since you left college. Is that right, Ben? Yeah, since you left college. It's been a long year, so he's kept the company going.
Yeah, I started working just about the same time as Ben did, basically.
Well, you finished school in '98, doing your A levels, and your mom had given you a choice. Either go flip burgers at McDonald's, or go work for your father.
So I started training up with you and played a lot of golf. Turned up late. Was a typical 18-year-old kid.
Yep, if you turned up at all. Yeah.
But eventually started learning some stuff. But when I was 19, essentially you decided to make it a bit of a homecoming and return back to the States.
Yeah.
And abandon your children.
No. Being fair, we called it proactive parenting. We left you before you could leave us.
It was a very good idea.
Well, your sister was at Oxford. She wasn't going to be coming home.
It helped us grow
and
up.
you were not going to. You were not
going to grow up.
Yeah, you weren't going to leave home.
So yeah, you essentially went back to America when I was 19 and left me kind of the European side of the handmade pickups. And it was a very steep learning curve. I had to kind of learn on the job still, but obviously having you at the end of the phone was always very helpful. Still is very helpful, and I hassle you all the time about many things to do with pickups. So yeah, I mean, I think the first few years was a struggle, and as you love telling people, I went through plenty of epoxy, raw material
in his first year.
Didn't maybe make as much money as I should have done because there was a lot of wastage.
Good word.
But after those first few years, I think I started getting the hang of it, and now I've been doing it for 23
20
years or
years,
something.
23 years, yeah.
Yeah, definitely got the hang of it now. But obviously, I still speak to you almost on a daily basis to ask various questions, usually about kind of technical specs and things, just because you've been around so long, you're so old, you have that added
Charming.
knowledge that is always,
Simply charming.
So yeah, basically we are at you going back to America in 1999, and you kind of set up again out there and tried to crack the American market even more so than you had, because obviously being in the UK for all that time, you were slightly estranged from the American market, although you were doing pickups for kind of Ken Smith and a lot of other American people. Yeah,
a lot of people. I was starting to pretty much same with a lot of the jazz guitar. I seemed to have cracked into the jazz guitar world, and up until that time, there hadn't been a lot of real good jazz pickups. People would talk about the Johnny Smith pickup, and to me, that's like a partial humbucker. It was only like 4,000 turns of 42 gauge wire per coil. So when a conventional Gibson has got 5,000 turns per coil, you can see how it's like only 80% of a real humbucker. So I pretty much captured the jazz guitar world over there. And Americans like to deal with people in America. They sort of think dealing with foreign people, individual people, that they're dealing with somebody on Mars, long distance phone call to Mars. So it did help. And of course, I had you here to set you up to conquer most of Europe. I had a friend of mine after the Berlin Wall fell down, the whole communist thing fell apart, Yuri Terza in Slovakia, then Czechoslovakia. And I set him up, and he doesn't use our rubber mold technique, but he builds conventionals. He'll use covers. He doesn't mold, but he'll use plastic covers and
and they were engraved with your name or stamped with your name and stuff like that.
So Yuri Terza was taking care of the Eastern Bloc countries, because at that time their economies were so low compared to Europe, they really couldn't afford our prices. So by him making them there, he was able to do a pretty good job, and still is. And of course, about that same time, I hooked up with a Korean gentleman by the name of Shai Kag-yu. And his initials spelled Sky, and he was making Sky pickups. And through Chris Larkin from Ireland, who introduced me to him, this is back in the early 90s, I flew out to Korea, and Mr. Yu had but 1 gauge of wire in his whole factory, 45 gauge wire. It's like, oh my Lord. He was making
45 gauge as well?
No, 44. 44 gauge wire. 44 gauge wire. And I said, oh, no, this won't do. So by the time I left 3 weeks later, we had all the right gauges, all the right recipes, and he has an incredibly good source of pickup parts. So he supplies you, he supplies me, and even Ben at WD has all kinds of parts you can buy. And you can literally build your own pickups if you really fancy that sort of thing. So so we have Mr. U is making pickups over there under the Kent Armstrong name. Yuri in Slovakia now, you here and taking care of Europe, and I'm pretty much taking care of America. And we're doing it. I mean, the sun never sets on the Armstrong Empire. It's kind of
So obviously out in the States, you pretty much do all the pickups yourself. You do have Joy who works with you, and she does help with some of the winding, but essentially if somebody orders a pickup from you in America, you're building it from scratch.
It's my hands, it's my, especially
not a lot of other pickup companies would run like that. A lot of other people would outsource the work, and in a way, work is outsourced to me, and work is outsourced to Mr. U or whatever. But that's for the more mass-produced stuff from Mr. U.
I do most of the design work of that piece. We've just designed a whole range for Boaz out in Israel. They're bringing out this unique new guitar. And I did all the design work. It's taken me a couple of years for them to get up to speed. And Mr. U is making them out there. And the good thing about Mr. U is he sticks to my recipe. If I give him a recipe, that's the recipe. He doesn't go and think, well, I'll change. He's not a designer. I'm the designer, and because I'm not a great guitar player and I'm not a professional guitar player, I listen to my customers. I listen to what they want. And when they give me good feedback, I know I've hit the right recipe. Same in the jazz guitar world. As I said, I mean, everybody from John Monteleone, his guitars are just, they're artwork. And I built some of the craziest looking banana-shaped pickups and zigzaggy pickups, and because of our technique.
Yeah, I mean, that's the advantage of the moulding system, the fact that you don't have to pay all these huge tooling costs to go and get 10,000 covers made as a minimum. You know, if somebody wants a one-off pickup or, you know, 5 pickups or whatever, it's very easy just to make that shape and then reproduce it over and over again.
I could take like this glass case, and, you know, I could turn it into a pickup by just molding it in rubber and building a pickup. In fact, the strangest pickup I ever built was for a concert harmonicist here in London, and I actually electrified his harmonica. It was a professional honer, and the pickup was 2 millimeters thick. And I wound the coils, and because our system of manufacturing, we don't use bobbins, we have what are basically called air coils. So I got a super thin magnet made, and people say, well, there's no strings, but any metal object vibrating within a magnetic field will generate it'll induce an electrical signal into the pickup. And we'll discuss pickups in a moment. But because the reeds are moving inside, the metal reeds, the brass reeds are moving, I had a little tiny jack on the end of it. You plug it in, and he said, wow, it's just wonderful. He couldn't compete with the orchestra. So this way he amplifies. So like I said, that's the strangest thing I've ever amplified was a harmonica.
That's cool. I wanted to remind you how old you are again, though.
Well,
that was the next thing to talk about.
Yeah, I'll be in a week or two's time. I'll be turning 69 years old. And
exactly.
I will be starting to wind down.
So part of the idea of putting this on the website is to let customers know that you're not going to be making pickups forever.
I mean, I could drop dead tomorrow.
Yeah. So we need to express to people that your time making pickups is drawing to a close. It might not be tomorrow, but within the next kind of few years, you're certainly going to be winding down and looking to retire, essentially.
It means there's going to be a lot more on your shoulders.
Which means I'm going to have to make a lot more pickups, which is fine. And if that allows you to relax in your very elderly age, then that's all fine too.
The love just oozes out here. Just oozes.
But yeah, I mean, people need to be warned and aware that, you know, they're not going to be able to get stuff from you for that much longer, and they're equally going to have to pay more if they want to take up some of your retirement time. So, you know, things will be changing a bit, but essentially any pickups that you've ever made, I can make, and I do make over here in the UK, and they can be shipped all over the world, and you know, that quality will always be there, and you will always be overseeing my quality control until your dying day, I'm sure. So there's no getting away from that. But yeah, we just need to let people...
Can't let the name go to rack and ruin.
Indeed.
You can't do it. I mean, I've actually been quite proud that, you know, I still hand make, and they're handmade. I mean, to be perfectly honest, any pickup is handmade. I don't know of any machine in the world where you just dump the parts in and out pops a pickup. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, but you can get winding machines that wind 20 coils at a time and things like that.
It still has to have the solder tags put on.
There still has to be,
the cables, and it has to be assembled, and it takes a human's hands. Yeah. There is, you just can't do it. But to say they're hand wound by you or Yuri or Mr. Yu, and Mr. Yu's got ladies on his bench, and he oversees the production. But I still actually do wind the coils and crack them out.
And cast the epoxy and make the molds.
I do it all. Yeah.
And hugely labour intensive, but it gets you a great end product at the end of the day.
But I mean, it's so much better that my customers, what I've been able to do through what I've designed is give the people the ability. If you look at a John Buscarino guitar with his logo and name on it, all that cost him to get into production was him making a wooden form. And he would make the pickup in its wooden shape, mail it to me. I would then pour liquid rubber over it, pull it off, Now I have the female impression. And from that impression, he's then buying a pickup for, $100 or whatever it is. And it's a full humbucker in this little time. So, but for him to have tried to get that manufactured in a normal production way, he'd spend hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, of course.
And to recoup your money on that kind of an investment. And that's why there's so few pickup companies around, because the tooling is humongous. And of course, for you and I mean, we can make coils from this big to like this big, because we use a very simple aluminum jig system.
Well, that's another advantage, isn't it? The fact that if you're using the moulding system and the epoxy system, we're using the air coils as well. We kind of give ourselves more space in there to really put in bigger gauges of wire and more turns, and that's why the jazz guitars that we sell, especially like the 12-pole one, is really popular. That's one of the best-selling jazz pickups there is.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I've been able to miniaturize. Yeah. We haven't lost anything in the quality of what's inside there. Once it's embedded in epoxy, it's permanent. It's not going to go anywhere. But it is just a very simple system of shrinkage, bringing it down. The reason the JS is not such a good sounding pickup is it's got a lot of plastic in there in the bobbins. Well, we've given that room over to windings. Yeah. We can build a full humbucker in such a small, little, tiny package.
And has it got to do with like the inverse square law as well? So if you've got a plastic bobbin kind of in between the pole and the coil, essentially you're creating some distance there, and there won't be as much inductance in the coil.
You are right. You're getting a much tighter. The coils are tight onto the blades in case of or the pole pieces, a la Stratocasters and Telecasters and jazz. All of the Fender pickups, the windings are right on the magnets. Whereas anytime you have a bobbin in the way, yes, you've got the induction is not as great. Yeah. The induction we can go into induction, but it's let's talk about induction real quick. Induction is nothing more than the first law of physics states: energy cannot be created and destroyed. All the energy in the universe, if you believe in the Big Bang, is X. And that has never changed. That number has never changed. All the energy in the universe is still there to a point. It's either been turned into light, heat, mass, whatever. It's all there. So when you have a magnet charged up and you're breaking the magnetic field called the flux, that has to be turned into something. And it's usually easiest for it to be turned into electricity inside the coils. It's called induction. It's inducing the electrical signal into the coil. And that electricity then goes out to the amplifier. The amplifier magnifies it many thousands of times, sends it to the speaker, and hey presto, you've got an electric pickup. So the tighter you can get things to the best of the induction of a generation is better, so you don't lose anything.
Yeah, that all makes sense. So yeah, we can talk more technical stuff. I guess we can kind of go on with the idea.
Let's talk about what a pickup is.
Yeah, okay.
A pickup is the engine of the electric guitar. I mean, you can put a bad pickup in a guitar and it'll work, but it just won't sound good. So it literally is the engine, and you put a good engine in your electric guitar and it works well.
So I usually tell customers that it's kind of 90% of the voice of the guitar comes from the pickup, and then maybe the 10% is the word
materials,
and
the shape,
other things.
I mean, I once for giggles, I actually strung up a brick wall and put a pickup under it. Sounded pretty good.
Well, we've got a shovel over at WD that's got strings on it and a pickup, and that seems to work.
A lot of people made very strange looking things. Yeah. I mean, look at my father. He made a guitar out of plexiglass.
Well, yeah, that seemed to work okay. That's gone down very well over the years.
I mean, they still sound very electric. And of course, you and I are able to shape sounds by using different number of turns, different gauges of wire, different magnets. So we can change it all.
So all this is where the kind of real magic comes into it. And it's not magic. It's not kind of all the voodoo stuff that you read online. But it's where experience comes into it. You know, the fact that my dad's been doing this for so long, he will very much understand what a customer is asking for when they say that they want
clarity with a bell-like chime or something like that, he will exactly know what recipe to go for, what gauge of wire to use, what number of turns to use, what magnet to use, what kind of layout of the pickup. And it's that kind of knowledge and information that obviously for me is insanely helpful. And, I can pick it up over the years, but to have him on the end of the phone and always be able to just, get that immediately is insanely useful. And I don't know if there are any other or many other pickup makers that you could do that with and then be able to kind of produce that for you and produce it for you at what is a very reasonable price. So I think
the thing I don't do, especially when I'm designing, I listen to what people want. I design that way. Most of my competitors, they design something, then feed it to you. And that's sort of not the correct way around, because I did a lot of work for Andy Manson, and Andy Manson was doing a lot of work for Jeff Beck. And I made a whole bunch of special humbuckers for Jeff Beck and his guitars. And of course, I designed it to what Jeff Beck wanted as a sound. So that's important. I didn't say, here, Jeff, try this one and eat it. It just doesn't, that's not the way to make pickups. You got to listen to what people are wanting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are set pickups and set sounds that people like. They like a vintage Strat sound, or they like the PAF sound.
Yeah.
And that's great, but there's not a lot of point in you sitting down and making one of those, or me sitting down on it, making one of those, when Mr. U can make hundreds of them and provide them and feed them to the market. And obviously, if that's what you want, you might as well go for them. But the raison d'etre for us, and the reason for us doing what we do, is to be more bespoke and to kind of really nail down what the customer wants. And if somebody says something like, I want that PAF sound, but I want it with a little more oomph, a little more bite, whatever, growl, then through our experience, and mainly through my dad's experience, we know which way to move that in.
Yeah, and we do. You're quite right. And Mr. U does an excellent job of making conventional Stratocasters, conventional humble. They're every bit as good as if you or I had actually wound them.
Yeah. Because
he uses my recipe. He does not vary that recipe, whether it's be an Alnico 2, 3, or 5 magnet or ceramic. And because he does supply us a lot of our components for conventional, we do actually manufacture everything conventional that he manufactures and mass produced. And one of the biggest advantage we've been, because we're using a bobbin, a special, slightly taller Gibson bobbin, instead of making a super distortion using 45 gauge wire, we use 44 gauge wire. Now that sounds crazy, but the smaller the number, the larger the gauge wire. It's a strange American system. But because we're using 1 gauge wire up, our super distortions have been said to be the cleanest.
So that's the difference between 045 and 05 in
Correct.
millimeters
Yes.
for the English and Europeans.
Right, for the Europeans. Yeah, they're using, and it's literally choking the signal.
Yeah.
It really is just, even that 1 gauge up, and if you actually saw the size of the 05, mid 05, 405, it's the equivalent of putting the Hoover Dam through a garden hose, or putting it through.
It squeezes the signal a lot.
It compresses it. It chops up, and it distorts it.
So let's try and talk about that. Let's try and talk about wire gauges and what they do. I mean, a lot of customers will phone up and say, I want to pick up and I want it to have a DC resistance of 12,000 ohms, which I try and explain to them doesn't really mean that much, because you can have a DC resistance of 12,000 ohms with a very thin wire, and it will sound extremely different to a resistance of 12,000 ohms with a big, thick, fat wire. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, talk about that. Talk about how
it's very important. Very important. In fact, for one of my customers, John Turner, we're using like a 38 gauge wire, which is a very large gauge wire.
So that's kind of the Charlie Christian.
Very similar to that, yes. It's very clean, clear. All the signal comes through because it's not being super compressed or anything else, but it's great. We use wires. I've got some wires that are for Europeans, 0.15, and to take that wire and try to break it with your hand actually hurts. And let's while we're here, let's dispel a few myths. People talk about all the different coatings of formvar, plain enamel, and bird spit, whatever. It makes not a jot of difference at all what the coating is. It's all about the wire. It is actually about the wire. The coating of the wire is the thickness, which is important, but the purity of the wire is important.
But the coating does make a difference when it comes to like soldering it and stuff, because working with formbar and plain enamel.
The lacquer coating has absolutely
nothing to do with the sound. No.
Nothing. It just has nothing to do with it whatsoever.
I guess what we should talk about is the different things that actually affect the sound of a pickup. So obviously you have the wire gauge, the type of magnets, the layout and design of the pickup, and how they all kind of interact.
The best analogy for that is the difference between a P90 and a humbucker. Believe it or not, they're virtually the same thing. But the humbucker has as much wire on it as a P90 does. But what makes it different is the fact that the P90 has only got 6 pull pieces, so it's looking at a magnetic signature of the string half as much as a Gibson humbucker. So a Gibson humbucker is looking at this much string, a P90 is looking at this much string. Same magnets, Alnico 5s generally, same 42 gauge wire, same amount of wire.
So you're talking about the magnetic aperture, so the aperture of the magnetic field.
Well, yes, because you've got a with a humbucker, it blooms out here to pull pieces, next pull piece, and then blooms outwards. Whereas a P90 just blooms out at a certain.
So with the broader magnetic field, you would expect there to be more sustain, fuller sound.
Yeah, more sustained, just a bigger sound because you're looking at such
less kind of tight and sharp. Right. So as you narrow that magnetic field,
P90s do tend to be a brighter. Also, the P90 bobbin is very flat and wide, so it's the outside coil is not generating quite as much, but it's generating tone. But it's not inducing a lot of electrical current.
So there'll be less inductance the further the coil gets away from. So again, that will come down to the shape of the coil. If you have a coil that's very thin and kind of close to the magnetic field, obviously that has lots of inductance, but that will tend to give you a thinner sort of sound, right? You don't get as much.
But then I can take a conventional Stratocaster type pickup and put the exact same gauge amount of wire, same DC as everything else on a P90, because it's a much taller coil and tighter into the magnetic field. There's no plastic in the way. Again, it has a brighter sound, but with a lot more energy to it, because it's really.
But that's because everything's squashed in tighter into the magnetic field, so it's just more inductance.
It makes a big difference, and of course, anytime you've got a pole piece pickup, you're looking at what I call a mushroom magnetic field. The way to look at that is some of these ponds have got a little spray coming out, a little fountain, and it looks like a bit of a mushroom thing. Well, that's exactly what a magnetic field would look like on a pole piece that's exposed, as compared to something like a blade pickup, which has got what I call a cascade magnetic field. In other words, the whole magnetic field just goes right over the blade because it has no way to separate. And to be perfectly honest, that actually is better for electrical generation inducing than it is because a line of flux going this way and a string moving with it, and it actually doesn't break the line, it just flows with the line. Whereas a cascade effect, the whole magnetic field's going like this, and the string is really breaking lots of lines of flux. So it really can generate a great deal more power. So shape has a great deal to do with it. Pole pieces, types of magnets. In fact, there's very few guitar pickups that I use ceramic magnets for. Super distortions and a few other high-powered, because ceramics give you a much brighter, more powerful, kick in the ass kind of sound compared to Alnicos. Alnicos are smoother, they're more gentle, they're more melodic is the best way to describe it. And again, it depends on what you're trying to electrify, be it a bouzouki or quite often most of the mandolin pickups I make are for jazz making mandolin. People were playing jazz type music. The country guys tend to occasionally, I'll build mandolins with a ceramic, same coils, whatever, but they've got a ceramic because they want that real cutting edge. They really want to be able to cut through the band with a ceramic sound. Ceramic is great for basses. Great.
But even Alnico magnets can vary quite a lot though, because I mean,
sure.
obviously we've got Alnico 8s that I actually use on Mike Vanden's pickups use Alnico 8s that I do.
The problem with Alnico though is Alnico has a lifespan, a very short lifespan. The smaller the number in Alnico, the shorter the lifespan. You got to be careful about that. Hofner pickups that were made in the 50 are almost as powerful as they were the days because they're using Alnico 8s, and they're just, and of course Alnico stands for aluminum, nickel, cobalt. It's an acronym. And of course, depending upon the recipe of these three, yes, I know there's no iron in there, so yeah, it's the way it's done.
And there's always confusion over Alnico 2s and Alnico 3s as to which ones were stronger and which ones didn't have the cobalt in them.
Right.
And in the olden days, it wasn't the Alnico 3s that had the cobalt, so people used a lot of Alnico 2s. But nowadays, if you buy modern Alnico 2s and Alnico 3s, they will both have cobalt in them. So you can pretty much look at it as the lower the number, the weaker the magnet nowadays. But some of the older pickups you have to be careful about.
I tend to stick to the modern Alnico 3s and the modern Alnico 5s. They tend to do the best.
And that's because the degradation of 2s is just, they're so soft and sweet, which is great at first, but in 10, 20 years' time, they're just not going to be doing much.
While I was still here in the UK, a lot of people would bring me brand new Les Pauls. And they said, well, I want this thing to be vintage. I want it to sound like a big, fat, old 50s Les Paul. I said, I'll come back in an hour and I'll take care of that for you. And all I would do is take the covers off, slide out the two Alnico magnets, and I would rub them against each other. And I would take a metal cabinet like this, and I would sit there for like half an hour, listen to the radio, and go, And what I was doing, I was literally demagnetizing. I was aging. The only thing on a guitar that can change with time is magnetic strength. Even though you're not playing it, even though it's hanging on the wall, magnets are still flowing. The magnetic flux is, you haven't turned off the magnetic flux. And if we had a 50s Les Paul hanging on this wall for 70 years, it would sound as beautiful as somebody who'd been playing it all their lives. So it doesn't really change. But the magnets, the only thing on the whole instrument that changes with time. The guitar is sealed. It's not. Its moisture isn't changing. The wood isn't changing. The wood isn't giving off carbon dioxide.
But ceramics and like neodymium and stuff don't suffer with that sort of degradation.
Yes, they've got ceramics will last 300, 400, 500 years.
Yeah.
It's the complete structure of being a ferrite magnet. It makes a totally different thing, and that's why they're so powerful. Same with neodymiums. And to be perfectly honest, neodymium is just, it's over the top. It's not necessary. It's just plain. It's not.
Yeah, I think you end up having to kind of deflect the magnetic field away from the strings to actually make it work.
Most of my customers, if they say they want a little more, especially in the bridge position, a little more power, I'll put a second Alnico magnet on the bottom. I'll just boost up the power with a second Alnico, which does a wonderful job. But like I say, I would take this magnets, I would demagnetize them, slide it back in the guy's guitar, put it all back together. He'd come in and goes, whoa, what did you do? I said, I demagnetized your magnets. I aged the guitar 50 years in an hour because Alnicos don't like being rubbed the wrong way. So it just did a beautiful job. But of course then I came across Alnico 3s and it does the exact same thing. Slide the suckers in and all of a sudden you've got that vintage 50s sound because Les Paul stick to their recipe. And talking in that respect, the non-uniformity, I've actually had vintage 50s Les Pauls come in. And they've been 8,500 ohms per humbucker. I've also had them come in vintage from the 50s at 7,300 ohms.
Yeah, there's a lack of consistency back then.
Of windings was way all over the shop. And that could be due to a lot of different factors from back in the 50s. It could have been poor quality copper wire.
Yeah.
It wasn't as pure copper as one would think. And that could also change. So, of course, with manufacturing techniques today, when they're manufacturing things, things are a lot more
Precise, yeah, of
precise and I mean, you and I don't have copper wire that varies very much at all per meter. Or
No, and even all the coating is very much to a
Oh, yeah.
specific
Oh, yeah.
thickness
Oh,
and everything.
they've
It's
got
all very
coatings down to a
accurate.
fine art. And it helps us because in the old days when I first started back in the 70s, I'd actually have to mic up the different thicknesses of lacquer because sometimes I wouldn't have enough room because the lacquer was a little too thick.
Too big.
And it can cause me some problems when I'm doing windings, so you gotta be careful. And our new suppliers are doing really good.
So, talk to me about the holy grail of the idea of having a humbucker and a single coil. So basically, people have tried with stacked coils, coils on their side, ghosting coils. Nothing ever really works, does it? There's no way of really getting like a Strat sound, but getting rid of the hum. There's just no way of doing it, is there?
You're right. The hum is the biggest problem. But there are two types of noise we're trying to get rid of here, okay? One is called radio frequency noise. This is a lot of atmospheric noise. And the way to get rid of that is through shielding. When I first started out in 1970, I was taking off humbucker covers right, left, and center. I had a huge, big filing cabinet full of Bixby tailpieces and humbucker covers because people wanted to lower the screws and bring everything up to get more power. But of course, they were opening themselves up to all kinds of noise. RF noise is one you're trying to get, and the other is the electromagnetic pulsing of the current in your walls. Here in Europe, your electricity goes backwards and forwards 50 times a second. In America, ours goes back and forwards 60 times, hence the hum. And it's a very low frequency hum. And the only way you're going to get that RCA, the story goes, an engineer was wiring a second transformer into a radio. Old radios used to hum something terrible because of the valves and whatever else. He wired a second transformer in. It worked, but all of a sudden there was no noise in this, the usual hum noise they get through a big transformer. And they very carefully dissected the radio to find out what he had done wrong, and he wired it in reverse. And sure enough, they had discovered hum canceling of coils. And hum is a hard thing to get rid of. There's no way to electrically through other ways to get rid of that hum other than two coils bucking the hum. And what happens is, because electricity, when it's generated, induced, it goes together. But if you were to take a humbucker, take out the magnet, and still put it back in the guitar, the hum is gone because the two coils, the hum comes together right where they make the series connection, and hey presto, it's gone. It's like having two waves come in the ocean and hit each other simultaneously, as long as the two waves are of the exact same height, which they would be. That's why you wind the coils identically.
So obviously that works great on a standard regular PAF style humbucker. Mm-hmm. But the problem is trying to get that working on a single coil and having a coil underneath it, because there's less inductance in that bottom coil. And they're inducing different amounts, and therefore you're still going to get hum.
Gibson P100, which was two P90 coils stacked on top of each other. And it was probably just about the worst Gibson design ever designed. It really was not very good. Stacking just doesn't work. It's not a good system. The only way you can do it is, as I was doing back in the 70s doing rewinds, I would literally reverse build the middle pickup on the Stratocaster. So at least in position 2 and position 4, you didn't get twice as much hum. You got no hum. Because when you go from position neck, hum. Stratocaster position 2, neck and middle, the hum doubled. Well, then you go right through. But so by actually making the pickup reverse built, at least you get that. And same with a lot of.
Well, so you say reverse built, that's reverse wound, reverse polarity.
Reverse magnetic, yeah.
So you've changed
there are 3 parameters to a pickup. Let's just take a single coil pickup, simple. The direction of wind, the north-south of the magnet, and your plus and minus of your 2 lead wires. If you change one parameter, like you've got the pickup wired in backwards, you're going to be out of phase with any other pickup in the guitar. So you have to change the second parameter. So that's why we reverse build and reverse wind. We're changing two parameters, and it gets rid of the hum in parallel. It's parallel hum canceling, which works just as well as.
And it's the same on like a Gibson humbucker, PAF or whatever. You're joining together the two finish wires.
Yeah, well, you can
and
also,
you've got the different magnetic fields going through the coils.
You could join the two starts and bring your two finish wires out as your plus and minus.
Of course, yeah.
Right, it's universal, it's symmetrical. So yeah, so.
But those are the two parameters that you're changing on a Gibson humbucker.
Right. You've got, and this is same with a lot of Stratocasters. I don't know if this one has it on it. Yes, this does. This particular one back here has got plastic covers with metal coating on them.
Right.
It's chrome. So at least I'm getting rid of the RF noise. So that with that, at least I really have gotten rid of at least. And of course, the middle pickup is reverse 100 degrees built. So this guitar is quite quiet.
So that's essentially a Faraday cage around the coil.
Exactly, it's a Faraday cage.
It basically keeps out all the radio frequency noises.
That is a Faraday box.
Yeah.
A Faraday box, which is, you can put all the shielding underneath the pick guard you want, and all you're doing is shielding the cable. And I'll get to something else that I had a young lady about a year ago, Donna. She called me, and she was having terrible noise problems, just dreadful. And it was my humbucking pickups from Mr. U. Dreadful noise. And I said, something didn't sound right. So I said, take your guitar lead, plug it into your amplifier, turn it up, and stretch it out along the floor. No guitar out of it. And listen to it. She did. And then she took the ground side, not the tip, the ground side, and I said, now pinch it with your body and unpinch it. Do you hear a lot of noise going up and down? She said, yes. I said, you've got a badly shielded cable. And the cable is incredibly important. Even American Belden cable is only 95% effective at keeping out the RF noise in the atmosphere. 95%. So you've got to really do the cable test if you want to know if you've got a good cable, because they always said how bad curly Q cables are. I bought a cheap one up in London once, and I plugged it in. It was the quietest cable I'd ever had. I did my cable test on it. It was like dreadfully quiet. It was wonderful. But the cable's an important part. So she blamed the pickups and the electronics and the guitar. And once she changed over to a better cable, the problem was gone. So don't always blame the pickups. It could be something as simple as, I had one customer calling up. This has happened quite a few times. And every time he touches the guitar, it makes dreadful noise. And I said to him, look at your jack socket. And sure enough, all I had done is they'd wire the jack socket
backwards. Classic.
And of course, now all the metal work that you're trying to ground becomes hot. And you touch it, you go, and it's like, So they people do silly things. I mean, it's okay. They're trying to do it themselves, and I give them credit. But sometimes they get it wrong.
So in general, pickup covers do tend to keep noise down.
Yeah,
obviously, with our epoxy stuff, we don't use metal covers, but we internally shield everything. So we're kind of wrapping it up in foil essentially, and then bringing out an earth wire from that. So creating like a little Faraday
so that
cage.
we're able to do all kinds of crazy tricks with the wiring. Even a Gibson with a 4-core cable coming out of it. The shielding is the grounding Faraday box. So it's totally independent of the coils. So the coils, you can do all kinds of crazy single coil, parallel. And that's something else. There's not a lot of difference between parallel coils in a humbucker and a single coil, except the single coil, you get back your hum. And I defy anybody to hear me a tonal difference between two coils in parallel and a single coil on its own, because it's just two single coils working side by side.
But obviously in series, you're almost kind of doubling the sound. It's going to give you a much bigger sound.
It's right there. It's really important. And of course, people have asked me many a time, where should guitars go? Well, the problem is our industry is so staid that were we to make it an equivalent to a car company like Ford, we'd still be making Model T cars to this day. Ford would be making Model T cars. In our industry, if you're not building a Les Paul...
Guitarists like vintage stuff, definitely.
They all wanted vintage. And of course, people have asked me, how should they go? And really how a guitar should go is polyphonic. one humbucker per string, and then bring those signals out totally separately. And I did this.
I mean, yeah, I make some for Alan Crinneran that are essentially, you know, the 6-string bass pickups have got 12 coils in them, and they're a nightmare to make, but they're a great pickup.
If you ask yourself, when you're playing a single note, there are 2 notes, but when you hit a chord, it's a bit louder. But you'd expect it to be 6 times louder. You'd expect the speaker to leap out.
Resonating together, yeah.
Well, because of the electricity generated in a string, it's an alternating current. But because you've got 6 strings going in different phases of AC, there's a huge amount of phase cancellation happening in single coil or hump, whatever it is. But by taking the 6 separate signals out of a guitar and putting them into a desk, you can control.
Separate tone, yeah.
Oh my! Everybody who has tried them, including Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics, he did a lot of recording with polyphonic. Polyphonic is the real way it should go.
Well, the old Wal pickups, they were all polyphonic, weren't they?
But they came out mono.
Oh, did they? Did they not have separate outputs?
No, they did not have separate outputs. Same with the Kramer Ripley guitar. It had, 6 humbuckers. It had 6 volume controls.
I've gone to all the work and then haven't followed it through with the separate outputs.
Down to a mono output. It's like,
right.
I mean, yes, you could shape the tone and volume of each, but it was sort of the loss. And the nice thing about polyphonic is you can put effects on each string individually. Yeah, and it expands the whole. When you get into stereo imaging, quadraphonic imaging, you can roll different strings around. It's just. But because our industry is so narrow thinking, it's just, I don't think it'll ever. I mean, we still, Mr. U actually makes a hexaphonic pickup.
Yeah, I mean, I think bass guitarists tend to kind of like to push out the boundaries a lot more, maybe than
they look a little more outside the box. Their vision's a little more like this, whereas guitarists are just like this.
Yeah, I just want that vintage.
Right, bass guitarists, they are willing to definitely experiment. I mean, I built some of the weirdest bass pickups for people.
Yeah.
Strange pickups, and if you look at all the bass guitars, and especially in the United States. I mean, we've been building Ken Smith pickups now for over 40 years. Very early 80s, we started doing Ken Smith pickups. So, it's like almost 40 years we've been building those. And we built the same pickup for him all those years. But he's gained quite a reputation for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good pickups. And what about the SS humbucker then? Because obviously that's kind of what we do instead of stacked humbuckers. But they still don't hum cancel properly, do they? They are still...
They hum cancel perfectly in parallel. But in series, they've got a little bit more hum. But in parallel. And I came up with a design from looking at different pickups like the EBO pickups. The coils were literally laying on their side.
Those are huge coils, aren't they? They're like big and fat.
Huge. But a lot of people have... there was the Gibson... Ripper bass. It had coils laying on their side, 2 coils laying on their sides. And I looked at all these designs and I thought, this is. I mean, we do a P90 that has got the SS system, and of course we also build the Strats with the SS and jazz bass. Oh, I built a lot of jazz bass, but they all wire in parallel, and they're really quiet, really quiet in parallel. In series, they're a little bit, and it has to do with the fact that we use a big blade down the middle. It acts as a bit of a shielding to the hum. And you know why it hums? Because it doesn't know the words.
Very kids. All right, on that bombshell. Well, thank you very much for all that knowledge that you're imparting upon us.
Yeah, well, I'll do some more videos as I did my earlier YouTube video.
Yeah, I mean, originally you were going to write a book, but this seems a lot easier, a lot more practical.
I have written quite a few chapters of the book, but I don't know if it'll probably one of those unfinished manuscripts.
Indeed.
You'll probably come across it once I've faded away into obscurity.
Well, we'll try and get more clips up and get you talking and getting you unloading some of that knowledge for us.
You got to get one of your 2 children to come into the industry before generations.
You never know. You never know. It might happen.
Yeah, well, you've got a 7 and 10 year old at this point.
Indeed,
In
yeah.
a few years' time.
They are the future, as they
Push them
say.
into math. So science and math, that's what it's about. You gotta know what the physics of what's going on.
I think they just want to play computer games.
Yeah, computer
That's
games
the problem.
and bouncy
Yeah, bouncing on trampolines.
trampolines,
Yeah.
That's what they want to do.
Good stuff.
Good talking
Cool.
to you too.
All right, cheers,
Take care.
Pops.